Welcome to the Phi Phenomenon podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen, and with me in this new format that I think people are enjoying, apparently,
I think so,
is Ted Haycraft.
Surprisingly, I mean, I'm glad, I'm happy. I'm wondering if if the listeners are enjoying these or not.
We have no feedback mechanism in place, though. Coming up today is my pick.
Yes.
And rather than do the egg timer thing, which I had made fun of us getting a long preamble, you're clicking on this podcast. You can see the title, in the title, what the movie is. We're talking about the Wachowskis Starships Speed Racer.
The Wachowskis Starship?
Yeah, I haven't heard what the last term they had themselves, but after they transitioned, people were like, what do we call you? And they were like, they didn't want to say Wachowski siblings because it sounded like a cop-out. So they came up with Wachowski Starship.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that.
You hadn't heard that?
No, I had not.
I don't know if they've changed it, but at the same time, you know, this was before they'd made Cloud Atlas with Tom Twicker. So, like, in the last few things they'd made was the threesome between all three of them. And then I think it's Lana is the one that still is doing Matrix 4 right now.
Well, I was going to ask you, I don't know if you had done your homework on the recent events, because I noticed that it seems like only one of them's doing active and one's dropped out.
I feel bad I haven't done my homework just because one transitioned and the other got outed in a really obnoxious way. And what she ended up doing was, before she got outed by a journalist who showed up on her doorstep to like confirm, she wrote an essay for a local Chicago paper outing herself.
I was looking at a little chart on Wiki that had like the TV series, the second season's like only one of them. The two of them were on their latest TV series.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
It's called
Sense8.
Yeah, it was like
with the comic book writer J. Michael Straczynski.
Right, and I haven't seen it. It mentioned that the two of them were on the first season, but the second season only one of them. And then I noticed the Matrix, the new pre-production of the Matrix is only one of them.
Well, I know one of them is rewrote on it, but the initial script when they announced it was co-written. I forget who one person was, but the other person was David Mitchell, who wrote the book Cloud Atlas.
Right. Yeah.
So this movie, as I mentioned on the Aaron Smith episode, and I've mentioned in a few other episodes, I worked in a movie theater for at least 10 plus years. And one of the benefits, one of the glorious things that you got to watch certain movies that weren't being appreciated by the critical consensus. You would find one good scene in a bad movie or something like that. Or you'd find a gem that no one seems to be talking about. And when this movie came out, it was, I don't know if it was it was a box office disappointment. I don't know if it was a box office failure. Was it a failure?
I think they're classifying it as a failure overall because of the money. There's just the disparity of.
There was clearly expectations on it.
Oh yes,
and this was
merchandise was out the wazoo on it.
I kind of forgotten all about that. This was technically their follow up to the Matrix trilogy, which obviously is expanded now or is in the middle of expanding, but. This movie came out, they'd done some stuff in between. They produced V for Vendetta, and as I'll point out later, they helped out Joel Silver on some movies and did some rewriting and reshooting, and most notable ones. Do you remember that Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Yeah, they worked on uncredited on that.
They worked on that, but this was technically their first movie since The Matrix, and I don't know. I mean, did you see it in 3D?
I probably did. Was it back when was this?
Yeah,
you put it together. It was 35 millimeter. Still?
Yeah, it would have been. I'm sure there were 35 millimeter plans. The theater I worked at was one of the first theaters in Austin that switched over to digital.
Oh, you were down in Austin when this came out?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I saw it on the IMAX.
Oh, cool.
I'm pretty sure that because it was going to be a big summer. It was, of course. That's interesting because Iron Man was out at the same time.
It's 2008.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes a film on an IMAX screen will keep off another IMAX film, so I'm not sure. But I remember seeing it. I thought I saw it on IMAX. Aaron could confirm that. But I was overwhelmed by it. I was really amazed by it. But the funny thing is, I don't think I've gone back to visit it till we picked it.
Well, the nice thing on my end of things was that I 2 hadn't visited in a long time, but when it was out, oh man, I watched this movie on repeat so many times.
Well, let me ask you this: if you did that, did you? Here's my reaction to it, and somebody might call me a fool. I thought I've seen the future of films right here. I thought I was seeing this is where film's gonna go.
What do you mean by that?
We can go into the details of it. The transitions, the editing, the camera work, the colors, everything, and of course it was green screen from beginning to end.
And no one was calling this out at the time, and if everything, people were treating it like it was a gimmick.
Yeah, and I remember, one of my friends. We talked about Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and how it seemed. We thought his theory was the green screen was so new at the time that it was nobody was getting accustomed to it, how to really work with it, and actors to work with it. Sure,
and it was still a learning process, and also there's for the viewership, there's still the uncanny valley part.
And it was still ahead. What do you call it when you go back and forth and when you're
shot reverse
shot, same type of stuff. Whereas I thought in this one, the Wachowskis were like, okay,
this is the leap forward.
Yeah, leap forward. Throw out the tropes of how two people talk in a movie.
Yeah.
And movement in movies.
Yeah.
And everything. I was just amazed at it. And so again, that came back flooding. I only watched it again last night, so this is pretty fresh in my mind. And that's all. It came rushing back. But I always thought this is, and I remember a couple of years ago when it was its 10th anniversary, a lot of pop-ups on Facebook everywhere was coming up saying, because it's 10th anniversary.
I don't think I saw it.
There was all these people going, Speed Racer, it's way overlooked and underrated, and there was these champions showing up, and I chimed in and I'm a champion.
I guess I don't remember this, but yeah, this movie is almost when you look at film history. There's this, you can measure the sophistication of technique, and people learn technique from each other. That's why someone like Lucas makes a predominantly CGI film, and he's the pioneer going into it, but he's not going to nail it right away. So there's elements of it that don't work. You need to have someone to pivot from what he did wrong to move into this, where, like you said, and so I guess it falls to me that we should sell the movie first before we start going into detail about it.
Sure, go ahead.
But the problem is that I'm very unfamiliar with the TV show. I remember it was a show I watched and would turn the channel when it came on.
Yeah, 66, 67, concurrent, the Batman era TV series. And then it was, I think, originally based on a manga.
I assume that. I didn't want to say that.
Right. And it's so funny. We should do some more homework on that at some point about how because I'm always amazed. I think almost every single anime was a manga first. In other words, a Japanese animation show was always based on a Japanese comic.
I think that's a fair assumption, but at the same time, we're recording right now. Too late for homework.
Yeah, true.
It's the exam.
But it's so I'm going to make that leap on that. But I wasn't really familiar too, but it was interesting. I was very aware of it, and I knew it was on the fringes of my pop culture knowledge.
But you didn't watch it.
But I was not.
It was sufficiently rerun by the time I came to my.
And when cable came along, you start seeing a lot more of the old school anime shows popping up, and the live action was like Ultraman stuff would pop up on cable, and so they started. There was a little groundswell of this stuff bubbling up, and once it seemed like all of a sudden with the comic book stores and video games. In the 80s and early 90s, all of a sudden it's like everything was up for grabs.
Around the time the direct market started making comic book stores.
Yeah, and so also this stuff, and all this stuff was starting to come back. It was really amazing. So all this old school anime was showing back up on the landscape, like Betty Page, being resurrected, and all this. It was just fascinating time, and I think that led into all these blockbuster movies.
But you're saying basically you're unfamiliar with the...
No, yeah.
Because all I know about the story of Speed Racer comes from this movie.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So Speed Racer... Okay. The one thing from just a storytelling standpoint I find insanely amazing about this movie is this has one of the coolest expositionary first acts ever. Like the thing, okay, if you look at a traditional 3-act structure, 3-act structures are simply defined as, I think Aristotle defined it as, get a character up a tree, once they're up a tree, throw rocks at a tree, and get them down a tree in the 3rd act. 2nd act being the throw rocks at them part. And in Hollywood, traditionally, what it comes down to, your 1st act is you want to get your characters on stage. You want them to show some character behaviors so you can get a quick inclination that you know who they are. You want to know what they want in the story, their goals, so to speak.
Exposition.
Yeah, exposition. Yeah, you get them across. And the 3-act structure is way too predominant in Hollywood storytelling. So we've all seen it. We know it. And the 2 first acts that I think were some really exceptional screenwriters just being like, all right, you want to get a lot of information in the 1st act, I'll do it, is this. And Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson's movie, where he has like 12 characters or 7 characters, I forget what, but it's in a very virtuoso. He gets across those characters very fast, really quickly. And this is done in a technique that the Wachowskis, we're going to go into a lot later because it's used predominant in this movie, but it's a technique they had been developing and really hits its stride here, where it's this montage that goes back and forward and gives you pieces of information in a very literary way, but fast cinematic way too, where it just comes up in these little clips and flashes, gives you the information you need right when you need it, and it goes back and forth in time. The first place, there's a version of it that's in the 3rd Matrix movie very briefly, and it's not that strongly utilized, but weirdly the first place I mentioned is in the movie I mentioned earlier, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake they did. There's this montage in the middle of it, and this is a movie that's excessively mediocre and kind of not a thing to revisit. But in the middle of this movie is this very innovative montage that's very invigorating that goes back and forth suddenly to, like, I forget what even it was, whether it was like, this is the plan how we're going to get past the aliens, blah, blah, blah.
Huh. I actually do want to revisit it. I think I remember thinking, this has got problems, but it's got some things in it. You know?
Who directed that? It's
a German director.
It's not the guy that did The Lives of Others, is it?
Might have been.
I don't know. I know he did something else significantly.
The nice thing about it, I guess maybe I'm showing my age. I was able to like put closed captioning on, stop it, and rewind a sequence because is that what I just thought? I think
you had trouble knowing if they went to the future or went to the past.
Yeah. The opening where he's actually I guess we need to tell some of the plot where the Speed Racer's got an older brother. It set a track record. I
love that I diverted from telling the story and went to this whole thing, and you're getting us back on track to tell the story.
Well, I mean, gosh, I'm kind of even jumping ahead on that. Basically, Speed Racer that's his name. The boy named Speed Racer.
The family's named, his last name is Racer, and his first name is Speed.
Right, and he's got John Goodman as his father, who's a big mechanic and makes cars. And
his mom, played by Susan Sarandon, is just a homemaker, I guess.
I guess at this point, because you gotta remember that this is the '60s when it was
sure
came from. It's very set with the '60s suburbia atmosphere.
Sure.
And then you got an older brother. And then you eventually have a younger brother. There's a big age gap. The
younger brother doesn't appear in the flashbacks, right? He's not around.
No, because he hadn't been born yet.
And the brother has a monkey.
Yeah, the little brother has a monkey, Chim Chim, who's
also not around.
Right, and then the older brother disappears mysteriously, and then Speed Racer has become this great racer, and they want to get corporates are after him and to sign up to be a big.
He's got to live up to the legacy of his brother, which has a shadow over the family, and and they're nebulous exactly what the whole racing circuit is. There's a few big races that come up in the rest.
There's a Grand Prix to get to, but there's also a road rally across. Kind of like the Gumball Rally, or
to a final race, some kind of final race. But this is definitely not a 500 circuit or a NASCAR thing going on.
They've taken it and in this world it's there. It's so funny. This world's really crazy, but they take the time that they actually throw in old footage of old car racing.
In the midst of all these like bright primary colors, that's way oversaturated. They put in some. And that's very digital looking. and with its planes separated, they put in like old footage that may or may not be old footage, but they make sure to put some 35 or some film scratches into it and sepia toned. And
so yeah, so what struck me is that the Wachowskis just took the tools and just said, okay, let's really maximize these things. And I go back to thinking, wow, this is going to change. We're going to see a lot more of this stuff. And it didn't really happen, I guess, to the failure. One of my friends, my age, who I respect his opinion and everything, he watched it recently, and he was not. He said it was just too much overload. It was too fast, too much stuff coming at him. And I kind of agree. It was. The luxury of the Blu-ray is that you can stop and start.
Well, this also gets to a certain thing that I love about the movie is that this movie is aimed at kids.
Yes and no. I think it's almost. I almost want to say we got a Dick Tracy scenario here, possibly. I think it all plays for all ages.
No, it plays for all ages, but I feel like the technique is what gets it to play for all ages. And there's some certain. I mean, there's not a lot of subversive jokes in there. There's some, but there's not.
Well, there's a very actually I think the plot, the mechanics of the plot about the corporation and stuff, it's almost too complicated. You almost can't. I almost couldn't figure it out.
How so?
The Japanese family, and then there was the other organization that John Goodman turned down, and then
this is the spoiler part where we go into the. This is the end of the second act where the.
Right. So we got there's all these machinations going on that are hard to keep up. You got to really stay on your toes to keep up with, I think.
There's a certain part of me that has seen this movie so many times, and when I'd gotten this gap without seeing it, and when that happened, I don't even know if I 100% concretely knew what happened. I just knew, oh yeah, betrayal.
Yeah, right. And I go back to Hitchcock on that. It's like the MacGuffin. It doesn't really. Sometimes the plot mechanics don't really matter as long as you're the thrill of the ride, which is basically this is a major thrill. Even I don't know if we want to start going into stylistic details.
Well, I want to go back into the technique they shot with. It's with the gap. I was able to analyze it a little differently than I would have then when it was so fresh and so new, because there have been some people that have taken it up. One of the big things they love to do is they'll when they want to make an edit, they'll wipe across the screen with a foreground element, and usually it's a close-up or somebody. And this element's been taken up by Edgar Wright most notably. But I know on one of the movies I edited, we had after I left, when VFX had come around, when I saw the final version, we had a wipe in the movie. And I asked the director about it, and he's like, yeah, we added that in later with the visual effects. And it's a way of sneaking an edit in there. But the other big notable thing that I was able to see that they took from anime, or all animation is basically done where you'll paint a background element. This is the old cell animation style. You'll paint a background element that will be a consistent element of the background, and then you'll put a cell, a clear cell, and then you will draw on top of the cell, and the cell is the foreground element that is going to move. The background element that's painted is not going to move. With cartoons, you'll move side to side, back to forth. They'll pan across it, but basically it's a horizontal painting that you'll move the background across, and the foreground is the cell. And basically, the Wachowskis apply 3D like live action animation to that, where they separate their elements, where they can use CGI for their background, and their foreground is a completely different element. But like you were talking about with the shot reverse shots, they can do so much crazy stuff where they'll isolate the foreground being an actor in close up, and then they'll completely swipe out the background.
Swipes and wipes, just constantly going, and then they're cutout wipes. It's just the head of a person coming in.
The composite.
Yeah, the composite. It's not whereas you couldn't have not done this back in the day, or it really would have been super difficult. And it's just it's just constant momentum. But
constant momentum.
It adds to the aesthetic of the film that I thought, wow, this is. And right off the bat, I just loved how the Warner Brothers, and I always like when directors had a kaleidoscope effect right off the bat.
Well, they also signal how much it's, again, going to my theory that it is more for kids. Colors and shapes come up in the behind the Warner Brothers logo right at the beginning.
Yeah, but there's a really, the stuff for the kids. You get the monkey and the little boy, and it's way over the top. I always had that.
No. The kids stuff begins at the very, very beginning. One of my favorite things about the movie, which I don't want to spoil the very end, but the very beginning is Speed Racer being bored in school.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's great. That's fantastic stuff.
The sequence where he starts imagining himself drawing or imagining himself in a race, and it's this child's drawing of a race, just shows the level of imagination this movie aspires to.
Right, and it's also it's hilarious because it's the most basic way of cinema. Paperclip.
Totally.
The zoetrope. Going back to the zoetrope days, and then you're watching this state of the art cinema. It's just amazing. I was going to go about the little boy and the monkey. It's just like it's a trope that Speed Racer shares with so many cartoons, especially of that era, and that's probably still continues to this day, where you have Johnny Quest had Bandit, the little dog, and and you're just like sometimes I'm like I get a little frustrated with, or Space Ghost had the two young kids, the monkey.
The one thing I noticed this time with the monkey was like chimpanzees are unruly creatures where they're like they'll go crazy after a certain minutes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are very few times that they were filmed together at the same time.
No, in fact, what little homework I did on this, they got in trouble. Apparently, the Wrangler hit the chimp or something at one point.
Really?
And so the so-and-so don't endorse this film or something.
Because the chimp is one of the most, it's one of those like transition or adaptation things that's like, well, this makes sense. You're going to get a real chimp. You're not going to animate the chimp.
Yeah.
Well, although I guess right now they would animate the chimp,
but yeah, here we are in a podcast talking about this, this such amazing visual film. And we're not going to be able to do it super justice, but it's just that you need to see this. If you're interested in any type of state-of-the-art stylistic stuff you can do in cinema with CGI and green screen, you should watch this.
Well, because this is all state of compositing right now, and a lot of VFX with everyone especially green screen's gotten really big in the pandemic. A lot of people got into green screen. This stuff is, the camera's resolution is probably comparable to what you'll get with the DSLR right now. Much less the technology to composite this stuff.
And of course, once the movie hits the ground running and it does not let go.
The one thing I didn't notice, I probably forgave at the time, is you're not a video game person, but this movie definitely has a Mario Kart feeling to it.
Well, yeah, I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to, I keep on forgetting. This is like let's just get off my lawn.
Go for it.
Moment for me. It's just I'm so stuck in the old school way that I never got hooked into video games, and so that's a blind spot on my side of some of the cinema.
Some might not say or some might say it's a positive blind spot.
Well, anyway, you could go either way with it, but I'm thinking that kid weaned on video games, and especially like my great nephews, I can see them watching they do Fortnite and they actually watch people playing games, that kind of stuff.
The thing on YouTube.
Yeah, and that I'm thinking, to them, Speed Racer probably plays at a normal speed for them. It could probably take it in much easier than I took it in. I still, even last night watching it, I'm just like, wow.
I guess I just look at, I don't want to just go straight to the kid viewers being ADD, but I think it was just something of like, this is the way the Wachowskis were trying to like, there was a feeling where The Matrix wasn't, the last two Matrix movies weren't successes or were disappointments to people, and so they need to make up with something. This is how, between the way they filmed it, the very innovative way they filmed it, that they need to do something that pushed the medium forward in a sophistication way. And so they're trying to push a lot of information on you at once for a very simple IP story that Joel Silver probably talked them into.
Yeah, well, the project had been bubbling around with a bunch of other people until they landed on them. And like you said, it's for kids. It's a family film. Even the kid, I think, flips the finger at one point. I thought.
Well, come on, he
I know, but it's just funny. It's just so funny. I'm thinking, if they really wanted to make it family friendly, there's a couple of things, a couple words, and a couple things. I thought, well,
I think a good family wants to flip off with corporate evil.
But getting back, I just can't. The stylistic stuff was just, I'm still kind of amazed by it. In fact, when I was, after I'd watched the credits, I had to go back and check a few things out that I like, after watching the credits, I'm like, what? I was noticing how the track itself, just the track itself, is adding to the layers of storytelling and the look of the film, where it's almost like it's acting as the swish, the speed motion swishing of, when you draw a comic book, you draw lines
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of motion.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
streaks, the track is playing that, and then the color and the just the.
Well, I mean, like a lot of the track has like a checkered flag thing where you can see speed going by it. I remember I had a film teacher that pointed out, that famous vertigo zoom in Jaws where
Pull back.
where Shiner first sees the shark. The thing he pointed out back to me was in the background of that shot are these dressing booths with stripes on the side of them. So when you see the pushback, you see the stripes move their shape much faster. So it's a filming thing where you put those lines in there so you see speed motion go faster through them.
Right. Well, yeah, and this thing is just filled with all kinds of stuff like that. In fact, there was one race portion where the side of the track was this image of a zebra running.
And, I forgot. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. I almost made me think about the old filmmaker. I can't think. You gave me a book on him.
Muybridge? No.
Yeah.
Edward.
Yeah, you're close. You're close.
Yeah.
Where he shot a horse. They were trying to see if
we didn't get it. It's a Rebecca Solnit book was what I got.
Yeah, but the horse is all four. He was shooting, trying to prove that all four legs of a horse.
They were trying to figure out exactly how a horse's legs move.
Yeah.
And run.
And I'm just thinking, just like these little things in that just may amaze me. But going back to the tropes, breaking the rules of of things like in movie making. There's one scene where the English guy who. Somebody pointed out looks like it kind of reminded me of Christopher Hitchens.
Oh my gosh, it totally is! Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
He's the baddie corporate guy, the big baddie white English corporate guy, and he's talking to an Asian corporate guy, and there are two heads, and usually you do the reverse back and forth, or you do over the shoulder, or you just you cut it sort of. The two heads are talking, and the heads are floating back and forth at different angles and different. It's that compositing you're talking about.
Well, the most notable one, the montage I was talking about earlier, is when they first dive into it's midway through the movie or at the end of the first act, when they dive into that first montage where they seriously go back and forth beyond the first act. There's a shot of the English guy. I can't believe we're respectable podcasters and forgot his name. They hold on him, and the background turns into motion blurs, and they pan on the close-up of him in a way that does not match up with the motion blurs, but they stay on it forever, and that's how they transition into the race, and it's a very breathtaking transition.
Yeah, there's like things like that throughout the whole film. I mean, going back to that first exposition scene where Speed is racing, and he could probably beat his brother's record. And there's a point where he's racing against his brother
with the ghost. You can see the ghost image of his brother racing with them.
And so it took me a while before they were going back and forth. With Speed as a little kid and Speed now racing, and it was so stealthful. It was so done well, so smoothly that you almost I almost missed it. And
the thing is about the reason this first act works so well isn't just all the CGI tomfoolery they're doing. Like the very first thing that lets you transition cinematic, it's one of those basic cinematic clues of like the first flash from old current Emile Hirsch speed racer to younger speed racer is you see his back, you don't see his face in the first shots of the movie, and then goes to a close-up of his his foot tapping too fast because he's doing it, and then it cuts to a kid with the same tapping foot. Yes, it's a very basic transition, very basic cinema.
Yeah, but there's it done, but even that transition, they take it and they seem like they take it to another level to me. And then also I want to point out in that scene where he's sitting in the locker room, to show you the detail they were keeping a hold of throughout the film. There's there's 2 or 3 fluorescent lamps above them, and one actually flickers and goes out.
So what's the
just the detail, just. They didn't have to do that.
Oh, you mean just like making a CG scene look real?
Just a detail of realism, but just to take it to that length, to that factor.
Just a real detail in there.
Yeah, I was really impressed because I think sometimes they would not have gone to that lengths to do something that minute in a CGI scene.
One thing I wanted to point out about the transitions is this movie had 2 visual effects supervisors, and one of them, Dan Glass, who had worked with the Wachowskis, I actually worked with. And I didn't work that much with them, but I did get to pick his brain about a few different stuff, but I barely picked his brain about this, and all he really said was that a giant chunk of the visual effects component was the transitions in this movie.
Oh yeah,
Which makes sense when you watch it.
and that's what I guess that's what made me think I was seeing something new and in the future was the transitions. They were just coming at you in such unique, different ways and so fast. You know, like I said, maybe the tapping of the foot. That's something is
That's an old school.
that's an old school thing. But you start multiplying it and then the wipes and the cutouts and the composites and just
Because when you take the film they use, and the feeling is they're using everything.
yes, yeah.
Like good cinema, they're using everything.
And adding and pushing it forward somehow with it all with the CGI at their disposal. CGI, I know everybody's getting CGI fatigue, or everybody's getting
Which,
kind of
to be fair, again, back to the Mario Kart thing, this CGI will not age well, but that's not the point.
Yeah, it still seemed fresh to me. I enjoyed it. I was watching different things and the acting and John Goodman's performance.
John Goodman, man.
Just different things that I really enjoyed. There's on the Gumball Rally race they have almost everybody is paid off to go knock out Racer X and Speed Racer and the Japanese guy. They were all teamed up together, and they're all there's a group of Vikings type people. What's called, I think the lady in the group is called Broomhilda, and they have maces coming out of their cars. Just just really outrageous, goofy things that you wouldn't think in a modern...
It's almost like an animator's grab bag of all
Yes.
the stuff like animators who are bored would want to add into something.
And a lot of the little fanboy details that I loved in this film that were thrown in there, little Easter eggs or whatever. One guy yells out, "Crom!"
What's the...
That's Conan's god.
Oh, okay.
From Conan. He just yells it out, "Crom!"
Because the Wachowskis,
yeah.
as we mentioned on last episode, are big Conan fans.
The animation that the younger brother and the monkey are watching.
See, when we're talking about this movie being for young people, that's the thing I wanted to point out. Just because, like, the way they, like, saw themselves in the animation, and then, like, later in the movie when they actually try to get into a fight, and how that the animation and imagination versus... This movie is so in love with children's imagination.
I think, actually, though, those kind of sequences are in the original cartoon, where they would isolate a character out, and the background would just go to just stylistic lines,
No. That I guess the background making sense. And are you trying to say that the animation that they use in this was from the original?
No. That those little sequences were inspired directly from the cartoon.
There's another animation technique that I always found fascinating from back in the day, was whenever there wasn't too much motion needed and animators need to get through something fast, they would decide when to go from 12 frames a second to 24 frames a second, whether they need to make 24 drawings to show a fluid motion or 12 frames to just get through something fast. And those sequences look like 12 frame.
Yeah, because they were a TV budget cartoon, and so they had limited animation. So they're all of a sudden in this state of the art film. You get the monkey and the little boy jumping at each other in kung fu positions, and they're totally stagnant over this amazing color behind them and speed lines. But they're watching a cartoon, and I'm like, that's Jeff Darrow.
That did there's something in the detail,
Right, and I'm like, that's really Jeff Darrow they're watching. I was so keyed into that, I didn't even
because
listen.
Jeff Darrow was a conceptual artist for The Matrix.
Well, yeah, him and Steve Scroce are both comic book guys, and they were utilized on all the Matrix films, and they're utilized here in this one. And so I'm like, oh, that's Jeff Darrow.
Wait, were they utilized on this?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That animation they're watching.
I thought you were saying that was stylistic.
So I'm watching the credits, and they both know, and their names are in the credits.
Wow.
But I got all the way to, in the credits. I'm a credit watcher on films, always have been. And two things that stuck out at the very end: Johnny Quest background music. I'm like, what? And I'm like,
seriously?
Yes, seriously.
Wow.
So I had to go back and find it. I mean, I can't believe I didn't recognize it, because I'm a pretty big Johnny Quest fan. And Johnny Quest is all kind of the Speed Racer 60s stuff they were playing, the tropes they're playing with. And sure enough, it's the animated Jeff Darrow stuff they're watching. That's where the Johnny Quest music's used. And I'm like, oh, of course. And I bet you back when it was in the theater, I recognized the Quest music, but I was so enamored trying to figure out that animation they were watching that I didn't even pay attention to the music. Wow. So that's where the Johnny Quest music is. Then another really weird credit. I don't know if you think you can figure this out. I didn't go back trying to find this, but stock footage from Moonraker.
From Moonraker?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, where would that? You know what?
You know, they would have been of the age of someone who fell in love with Bond movies, and like maybe they, got into the Star Wars ripoffs with, like, what?
Yeah, of course, it makes me think of like how Ridley Scott used footage from The Shining and Blade Runner. I'm just wondering if it's something they needed and then when Moonraker had
Why would they go that far back to Moonraker?
I don't know.
Back to the Jeff Darrow thing. Bill Pope, their cinematographer on The Matrix, recently did a really good podcast episode of Roger Deakins' podcast and detailed exactly why the first Matrix works so well and why the other two, which it should be said,
That's another podcast.
No, I'm willing to jump into that because I am a diehard fan of those last two Matrix. I will defend them with my dying breath.
Well, we're trying to defend Speed Racer and
no, Speed Racer is defendable. I
think so.
Speed Racer?
Yeah.
You just said the 10.
Well, I mean, there's some people that have not seen it, or didn't see it, or it failed. And
why are you fighting for their attention, Ted?
Well, because I think it deserves attention.
No, this movie deserves attention, but
Yeah.
the people who are trying to like listen to this and be like, I'm still not going to watch it. Like, we don't need to fight for them, and they don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
But The Matrix is a movie that smart people who have given it a chance have. Anytime I tell them I liked it, I will always see the body language and sneer on their face when I tell them. Like, even you right now, you're like, come on, let's do this. Like you want to be like, come on, why do you really like those?
No, 2 and 3. No, I mean that's like I said, it's a whole other podcast, and I need to revisit them.
Anyway, in this Bill Pope podcast, he talks about how basically after Bound, the Wachowskis had got Silver to go with this script, The Matrix, they'd had written for years, and they kept getting big people involved with it, famously like Will Smith or Sean Connery, and they would back out. So they'd get through pre-production, and then they'd have their main person drop out. So they had a really long pre-production where they got to hone the script down on a perfect thing, but they also got to really dive in to hiring comic book artists to conceptualize what they're going to do, which is why Jeff Darrow and Steve Roach were hired for something like this. And have you ever seen The Animatrix?
If I did, I don't remember. I mean, I bought it. I have it.
I want to say they were heavily involved with this. One of the things that I give the Wachowskis so much credit for, it's mostly in Cloud Atlas. It's some in Sense8, which I haven't seen the entirety of. But I always feel like a lot of blockbuster movies have some really junk values in them where they're like trying to tell people to live bad lives that are basically commerce based and like go for the wrong things. Money is the ultimate. And the Wachowskis always have this like little bit of wisdom in there. Like my favorite thing about the Matrix sequels is how I had a problem with the first Matrix in the Christ story inside of it. And the second Matrix movie just massively undercuts the Christ story in it on purpose. And this one has little things like, slight spoiler, very end of the movie where you kind of know where this movie's going, at one of the most triumphant moment, that scene we were talking about at the beginning of the movie, where he was imagine the drawing and his childlike wonder of why he loved racing in the first place, that flashes back at the triumphant moment where the movie hits its big point. You get to see the childlike inspiration behind all of this. Or one of my other favorite sequence thing is when John Goodman, they recur the fight between a parent leaving the house, talking to a child leaving the house, and they use the cliche line, if you leave this house, don't ever come back. They repeat that scene twice in this movie. The first time is the conventional way, and the second time is a much more wise and...
Two different brothers.
Yeah, but John Goodman says something in there. It's just like, this movie is just smarter than it needs to be.
Well, yeah. Well, here's one of the notes I wrote down. It was art versus commerce.
I mean, the Wachowskis are definitely going to get behind that metaphor too. What's funny is I've been thinking about this. I've been watching Cameron Crowe movies lately, and
okay,
yeah, and I rewatched Aloha the other day, and
I saw that. Yeah,
it's weird because Cameron Crowe's movies start to falter. Like Elizabethtown and Aloha really fall into it, where he's like writing somebody who's in another profession, but he tries to write them as artists. And the Wachowskis do definitely go down this line where there's that great Susan Sarandon line in here where she's like, when I watch what you do, it takes my breath away.
His car racing is like art.
His car racing is art.
Yeah. And the fact, and also you got the scene, you got all these like
going
montage going back and forth, building a car with the corporate business dealings, and going back and like again, art versus karma, the home mom and pop thing versus the corporate world.
And on a basic cinematic level, D.W. Griffith with Intolerance is typically credited, maybe a little reductively credited with intercutting and dueling action. Yeah. And this is such digital modern version of dueling action.
Of course they took it to another level with Cloud Atlas.
Well, Cloud Atlas is more in the book,
but it's more traditional.
I was going to say that doesn't have transitions like this, and that's in the book.
No. Yeah, again,
following up the Bill Pope thing, Bill Pope and them had a falling out at the end of the Matrix sequels, and David Tattersall, who shot the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, shot this.
Oh wow! Well, they get much improvement going from those to this.
One of my other favorite details in that last montage to show how this, like, again, the values thing and the like art versus commerce and the rich versus poor is there's this great transition of the rich guy, someone at the party's shoving out caviar, and it cuts to Susan Sarandon making peanut butter sandwiches.
Well, that's that same montage I was talking about earlier. So it really it brings it home again.
I didn't want to dive into something that I don't know if you paid attention to, but it was something that was an unfortunate thing. Watching this now, 12 years later, hovered over me. Were you aware that Emile Hirsch kind of got Me Too'd? It was a little awkward watching it because I mainly heard about the Me Too'ing when he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. People were like, "Why should he be in this?" What had happened was a few years ago he was at Sundance and he got arrested and pled guilty for headbutting a woman movie executive who was at Sundance with him. And he said that he was under the influence of, I don't know, it was just drinking or something. But he's since gotten sober. I think I read that he's written a novel. But before he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, this had happened. And I mean, making amends. He seems like he's making amends. But I read this after seeing the movie, and I just knew like that weird.
Well, that's interesting. Now that you brought him up, I wanted to talk a little bit what you think why it failed. And I was trying to watch this thing. I'm thinking this has got it's so rich, so fun, so colorful. All these things. Why wouldn't this? Was it because the other movies out of the time, Iron Man and other things? Or one thing I thought was maybe Emile Hirsch, possibly. I didn't mind him. I liked him. Fine.
I think he's solid in the movie, but are you trying to say that he's not exceptional?
I'm thinking he seems to be, compared to everything else going around him, and even the other characters, he's a little soft.
Well, he's supposed to be kind of a cipher for a lot of things. Like, it's weird. The other thing I want to point about the casting I found fascinating is Christina Ricci and Susan Sarandon are both almost cast just for their eyes because they have the big anime eyes. And Susan Sarandon obviously is going to be gold in everything you do.
And Goodman looks like the character from the cartoon. I do know that.
Goodman, my favorite thing, one of the favorite Goodman scenes in this is, the Wachowskis are stylizing the fighting when they happen, and they're coming off the Matrix where they were supposed to be doing, the next iteration of John Woo. And the one fight scene where they're like, we got to commit to this is John Goodman's fight scene.
He's an old school wrestler, and they take it to really cartoony lengths. It's really fun. But, what I want to say is, like, at one point Johnny Depp was cast, and then he had to drop out. And I'm thinking, I wonder if a Tom Cruise or a Johnny Depp type, and Johnny back when everybody still liked Johnny.
Yeah, there
would have been a little bit more of a, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but more edge or more of a cartoony edge, or a little bit over the top, just a little bit of push that maybe Hirsch didn't have. That maybe that hurt a little bit. I don't know. At the box office, I'm not sure. I'm just like I'm saying. Well,
the problem with this is a totally 2020 hindsight conversation where Hirsch's career didn't jump from this.
No. Well, I always thought when I saw him cast, I think it was in his breakthrough with Sean Penn's film.
Into the Wild.
Into the Wild. I thought, I'd think, okay, he's a Sean Penn school of acting. He's a very methody type. In that category, I think.
I guess I don't disagree with you. I also just don't think that
not to hold it against. Yeah, I mean,
I don't think he did necessarily anything particularly bad in this movie.
I don't.
His performance was what was called for, and I didn't fault him.
I'm just trying to figure out why that's the of course if Hollywood knew this, they would that's their goal is to try
Why this movie didn't do well, I honestly, the things we're celebrating, I think a lot of the stylization and a lot of people thought it was a gimmick at the time, and then it didn't turn people on.
And there's some people that write essays and defend this film and talk about it. Some of them look at it as an art film.
I can totally,
and it is. I mean, in some ways, you can look at it from that.
I feel like a goal of me on this podcast is to work Stan Brakhage into every episode, but there is a digital $100 million Stan Brakhage stuff going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I want going back to this another detail. I wrote this down. Going back to the art film aspect of the transitions and the state of the art. There's the army helmet guys, the guys that have army helmets on. And they're paid to go in the desert scene, which I also think is a little bit of a Mad Max nod, maybe.
I think I saw.
But anyway, there's like these 3 transitions. The guy opens up the money, the bad guy paying him off opens up the money from these guys that are army soldier outfitted. They look at it, they get real excited. All of a sudden, you can see money symbols in their goggles. I mean, just that. And then
again, that's like animator touches.
Yeah, and then from there, we cut out to them. They're like real happy with the money and the money emblems in their goggles. And then also we're back on the desert on the bottom half of the screen, but their head is still on the top half of the screen, gloating like we're gloating. And I mean, and I'm not doing it. You have to need to see this to see how wonderful it's done.
The movie I have not revisited this movie, but the movie I remember thinking that was a failure that reminds me most of this is Ang Lee's Hulk, where the idea, the movie I admit doesn't work, but at the same time, this idea of like pushing the idea of, as an editor, I'm obsessed with split screens and finding, especially in the digital era, different ways you can put more information in a split screen, and the Wachowskis have a very flowing way of dealing with this, and it's very artfully done, but at the same time, it's got a basis in a lot of classical cinema. I mean, there's a lot of like man with movie camera or
it's like I said, art. Going back, it's art. That might be a film we should do sometime.
It's on my list. It's on my list
because I do think, Ang Lee's like a master filmmaker, and why he stumbled with the Hulk. I think I have an idea why. Maybe.
I was saying man with movie camera is on my list. Ang Lee's Hulk. I probably should rewatch that.
Yeah, we should. Well, actually, we should. Yeah, I need to revisit that. But yeah, anyway, art film. I mean, it's just an amazing film, and now it's become almost like it's off in the corner, a little secret that. And I like I said, it bubbles up every once in a while on the social platforms saying, I like Speed Racer. You guys like Speed Racer? And you all of a sudden you find these defenders for it. So it's nice to hear that they're out there.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my favorite things to do with the movies is to find a favorite and then withhold watching it. Don't watch it over and over. And this was a really pleasant surprise because it's a movie I had on Blu-ray and I just hadn't watched in years, and I rewatched it again. I remember why I loved it so much in the first place, so thoroughly.
And I love the advantage now. I love the fact that I can play back scenes that I go, whoa, and I can just stop,
subtitle it,
and put subtitles on and watch it again.
Subtitle it as it was originally intended.
So it's wonderful. I can't recommend it highly enough.
So is that all you got?
Well, if you love cinema, I think you should really enjoy this. Anything else is just little odds and ends. I think, like I said, is it a family film? Is it an art film? Is it a blockbuster?
I did want to point out one of the last lines of the movie is "Get that weak shit off my track." So to get to your family idea.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's enough for this episode then.
Yes. Go Speed Racer.
Go Speed Racer. Go.